beginning. The sky above Caraxes Prime was the color of bruised steel, layered with clouds that glowed faintly from the energy cannons hovering in orbit. I stood alone on the obsidian plain, my boots sinking slightly into ash that had once been a living world. Behind me, nothing. No reinforcements. No extraction craft. No miracle cavalry waiting over the horizon. Ahead of me stretched the Empress's army. Thousands of armored alien soldiers stood in perfect formation, their armor grown, not forged, biometal plates pulsing faintly like living hearts. Towering war beasts crouched among them, tethered by neural chains. Above it all, upon a floating dais of crystal and light, sat Empress Cyrelia of the Virex Dominion. She did not rise when she saw me. She only tilted her head, amused. So, her voice echoed across the battlefield, translated directly into my mind. This is the human they sent. I swallowed, adjusting the cracked rifle slung across my chest. It was older than most of her soldiers.
Scarred.
Overused. Running on borrowed power cells and stubbornness. I guess so, I muttered. The Empress smiled, a slow, elegant expression that carried no warmth. You stand alone, she said. Was this an insult or a misunderstanding? Neither answer would have mattered. 3 days earlier, the United Systems Council had voted not to send an army. Too risky. Too expensive. Too uncertain. Caraxes Prime was already lost, they said. A symbolic resistance would be enough.
So they sent me.
Not because I was the strongest. Not because I was special. But because I volunteered when no one else did. I had seen what the Virex did to border colonies. Cities emptied. Children taken. Cultures erased, not with cruelty, but efficiency. Someone had to stand in front of them and say no, even if that someone stood alone. The Empress raised a slender hand. Her army shifted as one, weapons angling toward me with mechanical precision. Lay down your weapon, she said.
Kneel.
I will grant you a painless end. I looked at the endless line of soldiers, at the war beasts, at the Empress who ruled half the spiral arm. Then I shook my head. No. Her smile faded. So be it. Middle. The first wave came like a tidal force. Energy bolts ripped across the plain, carving molten lines through the ash. I dove, rolled, fired, my rifle barking sharp, desperate shots. Every pull of the trigger dropped a soldier, their armor collapsing into inert matter as the biometal failed. I wasn't supposed to survive the first minute. I knew that. The Empress leaned forward slightly. Interesting, she murmured. I kept moving. Never stopping. Never staying in one place long enough to die. Years earlier, humans had learned something the galaxy still didn't understand. War wasn't about strength alone. It was about adaptability. About refusing to fight the way your enemy expected. The Virex fought in perfect formation. I fought like a storm. Grenades scavenged from wreckage. Traps triggered by motion, heat, sound. I used the terrain, the ash clouds, the electromagnetic interference from their own war machines. Every time they adjusted, I changed. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. The Empress's army slowed. Not because they were losing, but because they were confused. No single soldier should have lasted this long. I took hits. My armor cracked. Blood soaked into the ash beneath my feet. Pain screamed through my body, but adrenaline kept me upright. At one point, a warbeast charged, a towering creature of muscle and armor, its roar shaking the ground. I didn't run. I waited. At the last second, I leapt aside and drove a plasma blade into the neural harness at its neck. The beast collapsed, lifeless, skidding to a halt meters from the Empress's dais. For the first time, she stood. Her eyes, faceted, luminous, were no longer amused. "You fight," she said slowly, "as if you have already accepted death." I fired another burst, dropping 2 more soldiers. "Yeah," I coughed. "Makes things simpler." She raised her hand again, but this time, the army hesitated. They had never seen this. A single being, bleeding, broken, refusing to fall. The Empress descended from her dais, her presence radiating authority so absolute that even the wind seemed to still. "Why?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Why stand alone against inevitability?" I laughed a rough, cracked sound. "Because if I don't," I said, "no one else gets the chance." Something shifted in her expression. The battle resumed, fiercer than before. My ammunition ran low. My movement slowed. A blade struck my side, burning deep. I dropped to one knee, gasping. The army closed in. This was it. I forced myself back to my feet, raised my empty rifle, and stood anyway. The Empress lifted her hand
And stopped.
Hold. Her army froze instantly. I stared up at her, stunned. She walked toward me, slowly, ignoring the ash, the bodies, the wreckage. When she stopped a few steps away, I could see something I hadn't before. Conflict.
"You should be dead," she said.
"Guess I missed the memo," I replied weakly. She studied me, not as a target, not as prey, but as something unfamiliar. "An army fights because it is commanded," she said. "You fought because you chose to." I shrugged. "That's kind of our thing." Silence stretched between us. Then, shockingly, she lowered her hand. "Withdraw," she commanded. Her army obeyed instantly, pulling back, reforming, creating space around us. The battlefield fell quiet. "You have proven something rare," the Empress said. "Not strength, not skill, will." I swayed, barely standing. "So, I win?" I asked. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something close. "No," she said. "You changed the game." Ending. Medical drones descended, not to restrain me, but to treat me. I nearly laughed when I realized they were Virex machines. The Empress watched as my wounds were sealed, my vitals stabilized. "You could have ordered my execution anyway," I said. "Your army would have obeyed." "Yes," she replied. "But they would never forget what they saw." She turned, gazing across the battlefield where thousands of her soldiers stood silent. "They saw an individual defy inevitability," she continued. "They saw courage without command, sacrifice without reward." She looked back at me. "They saw humanity." I struggled to my feet again, steadier now. "What happens now?" I asked. She extended her hand, not in dominance, but in acknowledgement. "Now," Empress Cyrelia said, "Caraxes Prime remains unconquered. The Virex Dominion will withdraw its claim." I stared at her, stunned. "And you?" I asked. She met my gaze evenly. "I will remember the day an army was halted by one human who refused to kneel." Her hand lingered for a moment longer. "Should our paths cross again," she added, "it will not be as enemies." As her forces retreated into the sky, I stood alone once more on the obsidian plain, exhausted, wounded, alive. Back on Earth, they would call it a miracle, a fluke, a delay. But I knew the truth. I didn't win by overpowering an empire. I won by showing it something it had never understood before. That sometimes the most dangerous force in the galaxy is a single human who refuses to stand down.